Hello there, and welcome to yet another week of the PolitiBabble podcast, where this week it is about should prisoners be allowed the vote. As usual, I'm Archie Portet, and I'm joined by my superb co-host,
Oliver Sykes.
It took him a while to come in there, but we got there in the end. So yes, this is our third episode of Season 5. So should be some good fun.
Indeed.
Yeah, so unfortunately our guest managed to have something come up very last minute this week, but it's fine because Oliver is completely opposed on, we're completely opposing sides on this idea here. Well, not totally completely,
Well,
but there's some disagreement, so he can't be quite as diplomatic in his approach this week. But yes, our question is, should prisoners be allowed to vote? We must ask first our guest, if they were a cake, what cake would they be? And I think, Oliver, we can create an imaginary guest here. And which cake should we have on our platform this week?
For me to choose?
Yeah, just choose a random cake, and then we can create a character from it.
Well, I think I've done this before, haven't I? Well, anyway.
No, just create a cake, and we can guess a character from the cake.
Oh, right,
yes.
okay.
Guessing game.
Okay. Should we do a couple of cakes or not? Or just
sure,
one?
yeah.
Okay, so you're playing the theme tune again.
The music's reappeared. It's spooky Halloween season anyway. So the ghosts, we have a ghost guest today.
We do.
There we are.
Yeah.
We go with the Max Radio's Spooktacular event where there's lots of paraphernalia on the table here.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got let's say we've got a chocolate fudge cake, but with I don't know, sort of a chocolate. Yeah, just a chocolate fudge cake. Yeah.
I think we're gonna have quite a roundish ghost from the sounds of it, because there's obviously quite a lot of chocolate and fudge, which is relatively high in glucose levels, I'd say.
Yeah, I quite like a chocolate fudge cake.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of
red
cakes
velvet.
Yes. I'm trying to think of cakes that we've not mentioned before. Let me get up a list of cakes.
So I think if you want, if you like red velvet and you want to come on and talk about politics, do come on, and that's our open invitation. The next person comes on saying I like red velvet, you can come on. There you are.
You'll know this one. At Battenberg.
Oh, Battenberg, very good cake. Yes, I must say you do have to speak in a German accent if you do come on and you're the Battenberg cake.
Yeah, I love that.
Yes, no, they are very superb indeed. But yes, this week we're on to the topic of the week, which should prisoners be allowed the vote? It's obviously quite a contentious issue. In certain jurisdictions, they still ban prisoners from voting. Others, they call for prisoners to vote. But what's your own opinion on it, Oliver?
Well, I know he said sort of we're not fully at opposing ends of the scale, but I'd say for most people in prison, I think they should be allowed to vote. Mainly because I see it as sort of we discussed this off air with Archie beforehand. Is it a right? Is it a privilege? I think it's a right. But as some of our listeners have said, which we'll come on to in the not too distant future, I'd say it. You should be able to vote. Some would say, but you're not really a part of fully a part of society. And sort of depending maybe on what you've committed, it's like you shouldn't be able to decide the laws if you broke the laws. So I can see the arguments for and against mainly, but I would say that most people should be able to vote. I think it's their right. There was another point that I had to say. Clearly, if you've committed something, I don't know, for example, mass murder or something horrendous, then I think maybe you should have your rights taken away from you.
But surely, if you're looking at the rights of someone to vote, and you want to look at prisoners voting in general, where do you draw the line? Because you could argue that person who who committed mass murder still has their rights intact, or do you start stripping away other rights they have? do you start eating away at their human rights just because they've committed mass murder? If you want to put voting within the right system.
Well, clearly their punishment, has been to go to prison, and their right of voting should not be, I believe, taken away from them, because at the end of the day they're going to have to go back into society. So I don't see why not. But your point there, I do see where you're coming from. Where do you draw the line? I don't know.
But you talk about them coming back into society, but let's say they're serving a 30-year sentence. Is that 25? You could have them be voting like the last 5 years before they're released, and then they have that sort of connection with society in a way, as in they're going back to society, so they might want to influence something. But again, is it really necessary to have that there for the full 30 years?
So you're saying that they shouldn't, for the full 30 years, you are not allowed to vote, or are?
Well, even so, let's say you're incarcerated for 30 years. Should you be allowed to vote for that whole 30 years? Because you've essentially, you're
saying it should be your last 5 years, maybe.
Well, could it? But then even again, if you look at prisons, their prisons, especially the big ones, have a really large population. So will they vote as in they'll vote as prisoners in place? So they'll vote as a prisoner. Let's say it's in the constituency of West Hampshire. I'm making up a constituency here. I've no idea if West Hampshire is actually a constituency. It might be. It might not. I haven't done my research. Fictional constituency called West Hampshire, and it turns out it's real. I should Google that whilst I speak. But let's say in this fictional constituency of there's North West Hampshire actually is a constituency. So West Hampshire doesn't exist as a constituency at the moment, but should the prisoners then vote if the prisons are located in West Hampshire as a West Hampshire constituency, or do they then vote at their home constituency? Which would you say?
Right.
So where would they vote? Like if I went to university, I'd vote where the university is. But then if you look at that case, well, these prisoners have a large population, and let's say there's a very close contest between two of the candidates. So one has like 1,000 majority, and there's a prison population of 1,500.
Okay.
The other candidate could then appeal directly to, say, prisoners' votes and saying, well, we'll reduce your sentences, or just get voted in. And that's not necessarily going to be healthy for our democracy, because they, again, have broken the laws. They do require a punishment in a way, and if they view, voting, some may view voting is not necessarily, is it a punishment not to vote in that regard? But if they want to vote, should they really be given a privilege in a way when they've broken the laws of society? They could be then voting for a party which says abolish prisons, murder should be legal. Yeah, that's what we could look at.
Well, I'd say whether you should vote in your constituency or vote where you're in prison. It's a difficult question.
Otherwise, you have a very few centralised constituencies where the prisons are, which purely appeal to prison votes, and because they are a voter base.
Well, clearly, I have to say it's where your residency is.
But then if it's a life sentence, where do we draw the line there? And if it's a life sentence, does it really matter if you vote or not? Because you won't be seeing the outside of society.
Well, obviously, the UK was forced a few years back by the European, was it Human Rights
Court of Justice?
The
Court of Human Rights
to allow for people to vote.
Prisoners.
Yes, I've lost where I'm. The item that I was looking at. European Court of Human Rights ruled that the UK's blanket on prisoners was unlawful and a violation of Article 3, First Protocol of the European Convention on Human Rights. So,
did the UK then adjust? I can't remember the case.
I can't. If you could look that up, that would be excellent.
Making me do your research for you. Well, no, only convicted prisoners serving a prison sentence of 12 months or less can actually vote. Well, actually, no, this is Scotland. Oops, wrong one. Oh. In Scotland, those still with 12 months left of the sentence can vote. But I think there's restrictions on if prisoners can vote or not, which I think is fair because, again, you were talking about earlier about, I'll go back to this, you view voting as a right. So do you think that should be a right for everyone?
Yes.
So you then support 2-year-old voting?
When you're at the right age.
Age. So we put an age restriction on there.
Well, clearly, because you cannot make an informed decision, and then you will. I know what you're going to say. You're going to argue now. Well, clearly, if you're in prison, you can't make an informed decision.
No. I'd say so. You put a
no. I'd say the thing is now the Isle of Man's obviously at the age of 16 where you can vote, and people are probably going to say now. If I said that, well, what I think 16 is a great age to start off with. You leave.
But you wouldn't go earlier.
No. 16 is completely is the minimum.
But what's your reason for allowing prisoners to vote? Is it just is one of their rights in society?
Yes, and they've gone to prison for they're human beings. At the end of the day, they've gone to prison to serve their time for the crime that they've committed. But elsewhere, they're going to be integrated back into society in a not too distant future, depending on what crime they've committed. So surely they should have a say on what's going to be governing them.
But then I'd look at the argument if we then take 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds, for example, who've just missed out on the opportunity to vote, and they're not yet integrated into the system. They will be integrated into the system because they'll go and live in that world. But then, is it right that prisoners who've been convicted of a horrific crime get that right to vote because they'll be into that world just the same? Do prisoners then arguably have more rights than a 15-year-old who's committed no crime?
Well, if
15-year-olds have less right than prisoners, are we really putting enough emphasis on prison and serving your time?
They're children at the end of the day, Archie.
And a prisoner has more rights than children. So there we go. They get free housing, they get free board, free food.
So you should say that. So you're in favour then of lowering the voting age?
I didn't say I was in favour of lowering the voting age.
Well,
but I don't think prisoners should have more rights than children who are innocent.
So you believe no prisoner should be able to vote?
Well, unless they maybe fall within 12 months at the end of their sentence, which is the current guidelines. But I don't think, again, it will depend on the punishment arguably fitting the crime. If that person has, let's say, murdered an MP or attempted to blow up Parliament, or maybe failing to pay council tax, for example, they're rebelling, they're damaging the kind of democratic system, then no, of course they shouldn't be able to vote. But let's say they committed a serious offence. Even if you look at, you want the punishment to fit the crime. It's like if you look at beheading someone because they didn't pay their tax, but then only imprisoning someone who murdered. That obviously wouldn't fit the crime there. And I still think, again, most of the crime which goes to prison, again, it is damaging other people's lives. And if it damages someone else's lives and it's not a victimless crime, then I think, yes, they should be punished for that. Because even if we look at the example of, let's say, murder, they've then taken away someone else's right to vote, in effect. They've taken away someone else's right to vote by killing them and not allowing them a voice in a democratic society. But then yet we're giving them a vote at the same time, and we're allowing them to have more say than the person they've murdered.
Well, at the end of the day,
ridiculous.
At the end of the day, not many of them are probably going to utilise
no.
their vote. So at least give them an option.
So I like drawing extreme analogies, as I've been pointed out on Twitter for doing. But they can draw an analogy from there. Most people aren't going to murder, but let's make murder legal because some might utilise it, some might not, and some might enjoy utilising it. We can't look at and say, well, yes, most won't utilise it, so it's fine because the opportunity is still there. They could utilise it. It's like saying, let's make tax avoidance illegal if you earn over 500,000 a year. You don't have to pay tax. Some might utilise it, some might not. It's looking at that example. But looking at crime, do you think you're saying voting is kind of a right, but arguably in prison they have other rights stripped away. They don't retain all their rights. So you think this is one they should retain? Turning to the LBC interview earlier this week of, you can't, but you cut down trees. You can grow lots of things then, can't you? Yes, but you can't grow concrete. Yes, you can. And then a full 10 seconds of silence waiting for a response. Oh, that's fine. Thank you very much. That was James. He likes cutting down, killing trees, and making stuff with them. Brilliant. We're turning into that now. But yeah, do you think then they should retain more rights in other areas? I'm pushing you for an answer here.
So by other rights, you're saying...
What other rights they're stripped? They're stripped their kind of freedom to move. They can't exercise at times. They can't go out of their cells at times they don't want to. They can't eat at times they don't want to. They're put under obviously surveillance and the rest of it. But their right to privacy is removed.
Yes, but you know, if what? Yeah. The on the Isle of Man prison, it's very very fair, and you don't your rights aren't that infringed that much. But voting,
the advocate which sent in a court case against the prison might disagree with you there.
Well, that was to do with the COVID-19 restrictions, and that was the prison acting in the responsible way of protecting the inmates. So they did say that they were put in their cells for how many times a day, but at the end of the day, the vote of each and every citizen counts, and that's the whole point. Is for a healthy democracy is allowing everyone above the age to be able the right to vote. I mean, it would have been great if our guest was in today, because I'm sure she would have.
Oliver's looking for backup here. He's clutching at straws.
She would have a lot more of an established sort of reasonings, as she's currently working on a scheme to try and get prisoners to be able to get information on the Isle of Man's political system and trying to really get that sorted. But I think it makes sense for prisoners, to engage with voting, and rather than being excluded. Maybe I'm going to sort of change my thoughts here and sort of agree with you, Archie, on this matter, which is, let's say, for instance, you've lived in prison. Not lived in prison. What am I on about? You've got you've
been imprisoned.
You've been imprisoned for 30 years for murder, or you've been. Let's not say murder. Let's say you've been in prison for 12 years for supplying drugs, and you come into your 11th year, and the election's coming up. Perhaps the awful at phrasing what I'm trying to say, but like you say, a year till you're coming out of prison is probably the most suitable time.
I still don't think they should vote.
But you said before.
I said it'd be a more suitable outcome. It's more amicable having that year than it is to have them voting the whole term. Because if you look at it, that person who's then obviously dealing drugs will then look to criminalise drugs, because that's their business model. Again,
you're saying that if they were to vote, they may vote
at that. Yes.
What's wrong with that?
They're criminal or in that respect.
But now you pose the argument that if someone comes out of prison, that they should never be able to vote for the rest of their life.
But it depends if they've. Again, I've not said for the rest of their life. If they're in prison, they can vote when they get out of prison. Unfortunately,
what happens if they've been horrendous? What happens if they've?
You can't prevent it because once they got out.
So why can't you let them, when they're in prison, vote?
Well, because they're in prison, it's a form of punishment. But they don't have a say over the society that they've chosen to harm whilst they're in prison. Why imprison them then, Oliver? Why imprison them if you could give all the rights they would have outside of prison, inside of prison? Why bother imprisoning them? Don't get rid of the prisons.
Well, they're sent to prison for going to prison is the punishment.
Yep.
You should still be able to have some rights when you're in there.
And they have some rights.
And one of those rights should be able to vote.
But what other rights do they have which are taken away from them, which do you think are perfectly fair? Because they have generally, the only really rights they have, which is for security reasons, are privacy, property, really. And sometimes education, depending if it's restricted for obviously security or safety reasons, like they are convicted of a terrorist offence and they're doing a biochemistry class, then yes, there's a slight discrepancy there. But if you're looking at it, let's say property, they can put restrictions on what you can keep, which is obviously fair because you could go and commit a crime inside of prison, which they do. But voting is that a right they should have? You're saying they should have it inside of prison. So again, I say prisoners get more rights than citizens under the age of voting, which I don't think is fair. A prisoner, why should a prisoner have more rights than me? If I was in the UK, I'd get less rights than a prisoner if voting was allowed. Yeah.
Well, I think we've sort of we've come.
So you'd implement voting in prisons.
Not to everyone.
Not to everyone.
No. So say basically it not far away from your release is probably where I'd go with it. I'd say not to, and obviously, yeah.
Only a restriction on release. Interesting. But let's say you're voted 12 months before your release. There's not an election, so there's no.
Well, there you go.
That's what I say. I don't think it's a big issue which they keep on banging on about. Obviously, the European Courts of Rights did go and say to the UK, it says it violates the rights of free elections and isn't defensible on the grounds of prevention of crime. But yes, the UK still has not allowed prisoners to vote, which I think is the right decision. They have committed a crime and they should be punished fairly for the crime. And then once they completed the duration of their sentence, that's then fair. They've served their time. And then she can return back to society. But whilst they're in their sentence, I think it's very important they are sentenced. Obviously, when they're serving sentences, they have to be sentenced. So that was a bit convoluted there. So yeah, you conclude. But what do our listeners say, Oliver? We can bring in some new points there. Wait. Do wait for me. I do have to do the. Sorry.
Deafening me up.
Didn't quite play the kazoo fanfare that I wanted. So yes, Oliver, what were these listener comments from this week?
We'll also carry on in our when we go to our current affairs section with a question that I put on the other day as well.
Indeed,
regarding
yes.
COVID-19. Anyway,
I'm trying to now remember what question we put up.
You put a comment on there, so
I
that'll
did.
be interesting to read out.
We're not reading out that order. Thank you, Oliver. No, thank you very much.
So we had.
I submitted it anonymously. So yeah.
We've actually only had. I thought we had more responses, but we only have 3. So we just got 2 simple ones, which is, should prisoners be able to vote? Yes, from Sean, and then from Liv, who said no, full stop. And
nice simple answers.
I'm not going to read out the name because it's just not really a proper name, but it's from a chap called Sam, and he says no, they violated the country's laws already, so they cannot be trusted with their vote.
Here.
There we go on that matter. So that was from the desk of our listeners.
What did the polls? Did you put a poll up in the end?
I didn't put a poll up. No. No.
Well, as we say, you're all prisoners when you listen to the podcast, so you shouldn't get the right to vote. You can have your say, but you don't get your right to vote on a poll, I say. Glad you've sorted that out, Oliver. But yes, we do now move on to our joyful, our favourite part of the week, I say, with our current affairs. I'm not sure what's quite lined up in the Isle of Man section, so...
No, me neither.
Oliver, off you go.
Well, we'll have a look at a few of the headlines, shall we? So, lateral flows should be enough to confirm COVID, says MHK. 12 people in hospital. I think it's actually more than that now. I think it may be 13 people in hospital with coronavirus. 4 spiking cases on the island this year. Further 3,000 people have been invited for booster jabs. Cody Nook appeal is in the best interest of ratepayers. That's a particularly interesting one for me. And there's one more. Important for schools to listen to public health advice, says Minister. I just picked a few random ones there, but mainly ones that sort of caught my eye. We'll firstly look at lateral flows should be enough to confirm COVID.
I think it's ridiculous. If the government wants to imprison people in their own homes, as essentially they do for 10 days, they should at least do everything they can to ensure that person actually has COVID. Because lateral flows, there is a small there is a small chance that if it's positive, it is actually negative. Again, if it's negative, there's a much stronger chance it's actually positive. But if it's positive, there's still that chance that it's negative. I'm going around in the double negatives and double positives here. But anyway, so there is a small chance that you don't actually have coronavirus, even if the lateral flow says you do. So why is the government then saying, I don't get why the MHK in question, Michelle Haywood, is pushing for people to be imprisoned in their own homes when there's a chance the test isn't actually true.
And also, the PCR test is
medical. Medically done.
And it's the gold standard for testing.
Not quite the diamond standard.
And it's the only way which the government can sort of keep a track of the statistics and legally require you to self-isolate.
Yeah, exactly.
So coming from a scientist, it's quite odd that she's gone for...
I don't see if I test positive on a lateral flow, I would want a PCR because I want to make sure every opportunity do I have COVID or do I not? I want to be sure on it. So I don't see why she's saying, well, people might not want that, because I've not met a single person who wouldn't want that if they got coronavirus to go for a PCR. They're not painful.
And,
they actually no. I say they're not painful. They are painful.
It's funny how the other day though she said government should share 14-day infection rate. So you don't want people to go through the proper testing system,
but you do want to see the rates from the proper testing system. Yes, it is rather odd,
hypocritical.
Indeed. But there's another one which we forgot Leo to mention on there. Which was the Minister for the Department of Education, Sport and Culture, Julie Edge, saying, important for schools to listen to public health advice. Yes, maybe the schools will listen, but you haven't said anything about the school children listening. And school children, frankly, do not like listening to government. They see the government logo and they run a mile because they view it as boring, they see it as bureaucratic, and they view it as complicated advice which doesn't actually say to do anything. And their advice, again, doesn't say to do anything.
Is that just your opinion, Archie?
I think many share that view, at least who I've spoken to. But the face coverings, basically, they said, oh, we expect you to wear them. That's nice, but we've seen no impact. Nothing.
No, the cases have just keep going up.
They're not going to wear them. They're not even if they're mandatory. They're not going to wear them. They'll wear them more likely to wear them if they're mandatory. But there's no chance.
The problem is that. Whoa!
I don't know what's playing.
The Isle
there.
of Man news has just begun.
We seem to be having a malfunction, just like Channel 4 did yesterday. We were having malfunctions with studio issues. Hopefully our image doesn't just freeze and stay on. So I only found out about that this morning when I read a tweet from The Independent. But yes, there we go.
If you're listening to Manx Radio and you've somehow we've corrupted the airwaves with PolitiBabble, hello.
Hello, yes. But it's odd advice, I say, to say listen, but it's just like the advice from the government. The messaging is never clear. It's always emphasised personal truths, which I think is absolutely right.
And they have
it's good. I say it's good they've not
do
put
they have
stronger advice
a rugby team? Is there, the amount of people that are in a rugby team for their communications department?
Well, were you saying that rugby? Were you insulting rugby teams there, Oliver? We have to be careful of what we say.
The amount of people, it's like 11 or 13 or whatever. That's how many people they have working for their comms. I think one person could do the government's comms.
I could do the government comms better than the team. I say, hire me. I charge about half the rate you pay the 11 people together, so I get the salary of 5 people, I assume. Yes.
Anywho, Cozy Nook. So the Port Aaron Commissioners, which are actually, they weren't elected by the people. They just put the name forward and they got in, which is a bit annoying in this year's local authority election.
Why did you stand, Oliver, then?
Because I'm not of the age of 18, Archie. I would have.
It's ridiculous. It is ridiculous what they do. Yes.
So they wanted to try deregister the Cozy Nook as a registered building, and that didn't happen. But there was a funny statistic today by the chap from Russian Heritage Trust, who was saying that 63% of Port Erin residents were in favour of.
Where they get these polls from?
And I was like,
is beyond me.
I don't know any other young person or any other person my age was not surveyed.
Well, I don't think most people were surveyed. It'll come from. It's not.
It'll come from their.
They're bored. They're bored, and there'll be like 10 people that say it's statistically relevant. Don't worry, I got a similar statistical faux pas the other day on Twitter, where a person tagged me in a tweet and said, "Oh yes, look at this," because I was debating about mask wearing in schools, and I was saying, "Yeah, it's personal choice with the restrictions." And then they tagged me in a tweet, and it's related to the Isle of Man. And they tagged me in a tweet of the YouGov for the UK statistics and say, "Look, people obviously want restrictions in place." And they would not listen to my argument that a UK stat is not applicable to the Isle of Man because it's statistically incorrect to do so. And I got about 5 people arguing about, oh no, we copied the UK in many demographic stats, so we should follow it. And it's like, they don't understand our views here are different to the UK. We're not the UK. We don't follow UK. It's not like we did a Brexit referendum and was like, oh yes, we're totally with the UK on every issue. We're not. We're different. I find it ridiculous with stats. So I think it's safe to say, do your research when you do stats.
Yeah.
Yes.
But clearly it wasn't a fair representation. I don't know any other young person that was surveyed. So clearly it's all people of the same age bracket.
Just made stats
and the thing
up.
is, in a certain number of years' time, not many of those people that probably were surveyed will be here anymore. So
a bit morbid there, Oliver.
I'm just saying.
So in an election, should we only allow those on minus 50 to vote?
No. But this building is probably not. It's not viable. It cannot stay there. So clearly, it's not going to.
Well, the whole extension is about 70. Is a 70s building.
Yeah.
I don't see the reason. It's not particularly architecturally important. It's not of particular interest. It doesn't look particularly nice.
No. You can't sit inside because there's damp problems.
Exactly.
The outside.
The only bit that's actually used as a 70s building.
And then when I was at, it was the pre-election meetings. Yeah. Anyway, one of the MHKs, I can say the MHKs now, I think it was Michelle Haywood or whatever, was banging on about the parking or something. That the new building would take away the parking. Well, people have got to learn to just walk.
But it's a pain to park down there anyway.
Yeah,
I never parked down there. Even when Noah's was operating,
yeah.
I couldn't park down there. I parked at the top and walked down.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
And at the end of the day, you can just, if you're in a wheelchair or whatever...
Active travel strategy.
The problem is, half the people that go down to go there can't even drive anyway, so they can't even...
Oliver's flinging the insults there. I must say, these views are not representative of the PolitiBabble team, and we will hold Oliver account to our internal policy practices later, and we'll be conducting a full inquiry, which will find him innocent, because, yes, our policy procedures are nil, but yes.
If I've been down there before a lot, and there's car jams everywhere.
There is.
So... Yeah, I don't see a need for parking there. But the board of the Russian Heritage Trust didn't like basically no one liked the new plans, which was an Art Deco style building, which is similar to like the Sound Cafe. Which when they put in the new Sound Cafe, the old Sound Cafe used to be a hut closer to the rocks, and it used to be shambles. As my one of my relatives said. If you had soup there, your soup would never run out because of the condensation. Anyway.
But I would say that location does sound better than the current one with the parking lot stuck in front of it.
But the sound, no one complains about the architecture of that building. But I just think they need to knock it down and restart and actually get something that can be open all year round and look and actually
draw people in.
And let people actually gather there and have a reasonable amount of people there. Yes. Anyway, we'll move on to another headline because I'm getting a bit doom and gloom, and Archie's really not happy with me anymore, guys.
No, he keeps on banging out COVID every week, and it still brought up again this week. We haven't avoided it.
Anyway, we've seen about sort of drawn up in the news of recent about spiking in the UK, and the Isle of Man police have now sort of brought upon the topic and trying to sort of raise awareness around the issue, because they said there's been 4 cases of it this year that have been reported, but there's currently a big sort of discussion going on in the UK regarding a lot of young people obviously that's where most young people, that's where it usually happens, is at bars and clubs. And just showing how often it happens and how horrendous it is. It's awful. Like they say, keep your drink with you and always.
But then as the people argue, it's fascinating. You then see the divide with them all. Everyone calling out the spiking of drinks, and then you have those who are anti people being searched before, which I think is a bit odd, because at least if you're then at least it's more secure than saying, oh, but we don't want everyone to be searched, we don't want to be allowed in, but we don't want spiking to happen. There has to be a way of policing it, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, what can you do? It's awful.
So, Archie keeps saying, why do you keep banging on about COVID, Oliver? Well, the Isle of Man has a higher infection rate than anywhere else in the
Oliver's
UK.
getting angry here.
In the UK region. It's got one of the highest R rates probably in the world.
But our death rate is still ridiculously low. We had a really, really good vaccination program. We're rolling out the vaccines. We've rolled out the vaccines. We haven't dithered and delayed like the UK would have done under Jeremy Corbyn if Jeremy Corbyn had been elected. But instead, we've rocketed forward over
don't know what
Johnson.
Corbyn would have done.
We rocketed ahead, and we have a good policy. We aren't seeing the same deaths as the UK. Any deaths are obviously very unfortunate. But again, Oliver, we have to live with COVID.
Well, there's an average of 88 cases being confirmed each day. The R rate is of 1.27, which is higher than any other.
But we
UK
aren't seeing
region.
the same deaths.
And the latest government surveillance report states that 11 out of the 13 COVID-positive patients have had the 2+2 vaccination.
What would you suggest? What would you suggest we do? There we are. That's always the key
What I
question, which
suggest
no
we
one wants to
do-
answer. What do you suggest we do?
I suggest that. There you go. I suggest that
Exactly.
I suggest that people do personally what they want to do.
The Isle of Man has one of the worst COVID rates out of all UK regions, if we're not in the UK.
I would advise.
But we can do what we like to do individually.
But I would. Well, there's not a lot we can do. There's not a lot we can do. But I would strongly advise that if you go into gatherings or your public areas, that you wear a mask and you keep away from people. And remember, hands, face, space. Basically, don't.
Oliver is the new communications department. Do you work for them, Oliver? Is that why you know they're the size of a rugby team? Are you one of those 11?
I've heard of inside sources. No, but I cannot say this is what we should be doing because I don't know. I'm not the public health directorate.
The public health director hasn't actually given any. There's no concrete plan. There's no plan in place currently.
Well,
They're working out a
hopefully,
island plan. They like island plans.
Yeah, hopefully of some point early next week. We're supposed to be having a media briefing this week. I mean, we could ask him. He's only next door.
We have intercom.
whether we're going to have a COVID briefing. I mean, he's here, so clearly not. Maybe tomorrow.
There might be one
but,
at midnight.
But they did say...
There might be one at 9 o'clock saying we're going to lockdown Monday.
Oh no!
Which I highly doubt's going to happen.
No.
And if it did, I'd be ridiculous.
But they did say if the hospital, and I do agree, if the hospital is going to become severely under pressure, then we do need to put in some restrictions in place. Would you agree with that, Archie?
No.
So why not?
Why not? Because again, if this was the flu, as we have every year, the NHS keeps on getting overloaded with the flu. The NHS needs to adapt, and we're very lucky with our NHS. Is much less is a lot less stressed than the UK services are. The UK has a rubbish winter every winter and has done for the last 15, 20 years.
And they say
because the NHS is a broken system. And if you look at it, we aren't there to damage 99% of the population for 1% of people. If we have measures in place, it restricts the lives of the majority for the minority. The minority has been vaccinated. There's only so much we can do. And to put that hospital pressure on, there needs to be other ways of dealing with it, which don't end up putting damaging restrictions on the rest of the population. It damages social interactions, early stage development with children in schools. Even looking at facial recognitions, we are a social creature as a human. We require facial expressions really to communicate what we're saying across. Face masks muffle voices, especially even if looking in classrooms. It will damage teaching, it will damage that learning environment and put us at a disadvantage. I don't think there is a strong argument for introducing mask ban when we have been vaccinated and we are generally protected.
Well, there you go. You do make a fair point there, as usual. But, worst comes to worst, then
Oliver's calling for a full national lockdown for 12 months.
No, we do have to protect. We do have to protect life.
But the thing is, which keeps on coming, recurring. Protect the NHS. Protect the NHS. But the NHS's job and its original function was to protect us.
Anyway, we'll move on.
Fair enough. Yes.
Do you want to go to a bit of UK current affairs?
Well, you can go to your poll. What was your poll you put on earlier?
I haven't put up on the poll.
The poll about... Did you not in the end?
No. It was just a question. I only got one response, but I was going to say your response. That would have been quite funny, but anyways.
Oh, what was the anonymous response, Oliver?
What from you?
Not from me. I didn't receive any response.
No, we won't bother with that.
Really? Well,
No.
I'll read out the anonymous response. I think it was from you, Oliver. That's why I don't want to read it out. Let me just load up the intranet here. And Oliver's just disappeared with the result. I shall read out Oliver's response, or Oliver's response. Actually, we got two responses, which is surprising here. So we got one from an anonymous source saying absolutely not. They starve us as oxygen, kill humans, and increase the likelihood of getting COVID. Well, I'm gonna say that's quite a controversial response. I don't think we're actually going to look at masks increasing the likelihood of getting COVID. That's something quite controversial there, but I do think there is a fair point in this. Was in relation to a question we asked saying, hello all, as we had an interesting discussion in the last week's podcast regarding COVID. Here's a quick question: should we be putting COVID restrictions in place on schools? If not, why? So another one says, this came from James, said, no, by all means suggest measures, but it should be up to the students in the end. And this is, again, pushing for a personal choice, a personal responsibility in what you want to do. But there is, again, a key point which counters this. And this is, again, I can sympathise with this point of view, but again, I'm not for restrictions, so I still wouldn't implement it. But wearing a mask does not protect me from getting COVID. It may protect me from getting others. It maybe is the altruistic thing to do. But for example, I have an exam which is coming up. I know in that week coming up to the exam, I can't be ill for that exam, because being ill for that exam, it's a particularly mentally taxing exam. So I need to be on top form. So I will restrict my time in school because I don't want to go and catch something. But again, masks won't reduce me catching it. Other people wearing masks, because you're in close proximity to people, I don't really think it has that great impact. But it does seem Oliver has now appeared from his ghost form. He faded out there. He faded through the walls, phased almost as a sci-fi movie. He melted into the floor, and he's melted back up in a new, re-emerged anti-COVID, anti-lockdown, anti-vax form. So, Oliver, what's your new opinion on vaccines? You've been reformed, I suppose.
Well, Archie, as you appear to be coughing for a few seconds, I had to just leave the studio and sanitise myself down because I was getting rather concerned.
Coughing, oh dear.
And
I never cough.
Thankfully, the ventilation system's now sort of come on a bit, so that'll hopefully keep your coughs at bay.
I mean, your coughs, Oliver. That's why you have to leave.
Oh.
Yes.
Anywho. Have you moved on to any?
Well, I was just discussing our wonderful comments from our listener, Oliver.
Yes.
They were quite interesting. One was controversial. The other one was more pushing for personal choice. We got two responses. So
yeah, I think it's a mix of both. It should be personal choice. Sort of going back on what I said.
But if it's personal choice, it can't also be required responsibility. The two don't work in hand.
Yeah. Well, we're at a difficult point with COVID at the moment.
Well, we have now reached our UK news section. So this week we did see our brilliant, wonderful Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, announce the new budget. Obviously,
why is it Rishi?
It was a relation to spitting image, Oliver.
Yes.
We saw a £2 million diamond almost thrown away by a Northumberland owner, and we had obviously Keir Starmer replaced at P&Q's by Ed Miliband. So yes, those are in place, and that has really been the key points from this week, which I've taken at least. So yes, we had Rishi's new budget come in yesterday. I think there was a bit too much spending and a little too few cuts. We have obviously had a massive deficit in the last year, but it was almost a bit for everyone, the budget, as it was described by some political pundits. It was almost a bit for everyone, a bit for those on the lower end of the socio-economic spectrum, a bit on those for the left, a bit on those on the traditional Tory base, a bit of those on the top.
And so it fitted everyone.
Yeah, it's a bit of everyone, really. But it was also looking at, I think, a particular pertinent part there was for hospitality on the alcohol duty.
Yes,
We
yeah.
saw beer reduced. We saw the super duty almost on sparkling wine reduced. And you'll pay. They'll be frozen for the next year, apart from beer, which has been reduced to 5% already. So you make a saving of about
Yeah,
5%.
It depending on basically stronger volume.
In a year's
It'll go
time, a stronger volume is you have higher duties to pay than a lower volume.
Yeah.
And the best part is it is a champagne budget, which we can all toast after all. And as I think, yes, it is a champagne budget because champagne's duty will be reduced. Champagne is a cheaper price, which I think is a good item. And as Rishi said it, I think. What did you think of the budget there, Oliver?
Yeah, I think it's surprisingly well. I mean, like you say, he spent an awful lot, and funny enough, in one of my recommendations, it'll interrelate with the budget. So yeah, but I think we to get out of the phase we're going on. I mean, the Isle of Man's got to spend. Over the next few years, we've got to put that investment in the people, especially as we're moving towards going green.
So the island should copy the UK's budget.
No, but go down a
similar route.
A similar route.
There's too much spending though. If we followed a giant commitment to the spending increases, we'd be looking at even more debt, and we can't legally go into debt.
Yeah,
we can't have more debt than we can pay off. It's a weird clause in our Treasury Act, which is I think is quite good. But as Rishi said to start, he obviously it's quite fascinating how the budget's presented in the UK. The Chancellor, he is a teetotaler, so he doesn't make use of this. In the past, 3 Chancellors haven't either. But they are legally. It's the only time when the budget's being debated that the Chancellor is the only person who can actually drink alcohol in the Commons chamber. It's a historical tradition that they can. It's a privilege of them. So we had obviously it's now Lord Howe, Geoffrey Howe. Margaret Thatcher's Chancellor. He used to favour a gin and tonic, for example. And then the last one to drink was Ken Clarke, and he enjoyed a. What was it? It was brandy and water or something like that. So it's quite interesting. There's a history behind it. Anyway, the chairman of Ways and Means, so the deputy speaker, usually presides over the Commons debate. So obviously it's a female, so you get the Madam Deputy Speaker to start there. But as Rishi Sunak said, employment is up, investment is growing, public services are improving, the public's finances are stabilising, and wages are rising. So I think he is painting almost quite a positive picture of the UK's budget, which was welcome to see, and especially with I've forgotten the name of the Office for Budget Response. The OBR, sorry, has given a much better stance of this budget compared to others. We were looking to return to pre-level COVID economy levels by the end of the year, by the break of the new year, which I think is incredibly positive when we look at our counterparts who haven't fared so badly, have fared much worse in the likes of the EU member states. So maybe I think it was good we did Brexit after all. Yes, another economic argument, an economic benefit of Brexit, I'd say. We've managed to recover and bounce back better, as Boris keeps on referring to. But we had interesting, because Keir Starmer was obviously off ill. Rachel Reeves, traditionally the Chancellor...
He wasn't just off ill, he
had
tested
COVID.
Positive for COVID.
But Rachel Reeves is the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. But usually it falls to the leader of the opposition to give the budget response for the opposition. But if the leader of opposition isn't there, it falls to the deputy leader of the opposition, Angela Rayner, who's doing constituency work at the moment. On a bereavement leave at the moment, so she wasn't in Parliament. There was a scurry around at the start to work out who was to take the place, and it fell to Rachel Reeves, who is she's a competent speaker on the Labour side. I'm not so in support of her, but she knows her economics at least. She worked at the Bank of England for many years.
Oh right,
she's a strong economist. In that regard, she's well educated. I don't agree with her style of economics, but she was able to give a good response. But she criticised, as I was talking about the champagne budget earlier, she was saying how the millionaires on their private jets on the short haul flights across the country, because airfare was part of the budget. Will be what's it called? Toasting with their champagne.
Well, someone on the
because
Alaman,
champagne's cheaper.
someone on the Alaman's called for that to be cut to hopefully boost a bit of tourism.
I think it was the wrong measure, because it makes short haul flights a lot cheaper, and will almost promote short haul flights within the country, when we should be utilising train networks. We should be utilising more environmentally friendly forms of transport, as with the green drive to build back better, as Boris pushes ahead of COP26. But yeah, another point which I think you will like to mention on is Keir Starmer's absence at PMQs.
Yes.
What did you make of that?
Well, we had Bacon Butty Man, didn't we, in his replacement, Ed Miliband. Yes, no, I think it was rather excellent. As me and Archie were discussing on our here, it's great to see a bit of a difference, and not having Ed. In not having Keir, we had the charismatic Ed Miliband, who was former leader of the Labour Party.
I know, he's much more charismatic than. Well, he ate the bacon butty and lost the election because of the bacon butty, so he always has to play into that charismatic role. But yes, he is much more engaging, I think. And as he said, he got cheer. He almost got cheer. He was cheering. It wasn't the bad form. It was the kind of like the eruption of laughter because he's back. And he was like, I said, I'm back for. And I must say to my fellow members across this house, I'm back for just this one time and one time only, or something to that effect. He's always been quite charismatic. Yes, he was much. It was returning back to the good old days of Cameron and Miliband PMQs, which are much better to watch than the current. Keir asking a question, trying to be pertinent, Boris saying, blue passports, and we're building back better, and giving you quite a good rhetoric response. And he brings it back to what he wants to say all the time. Well, yes, I shall discuss that later today. We have a good plan on it. And what are Labour doing? He turns round to address the Conservative bench. Well, Labour are just dithering and delaying. So he gives quite an impassioned speech. And then Keir comes back, almost either saying, "Oh, the Prime Minister seems not to have listened to my questions. Oh, but I'll ask another question in this regard." And he doesn't seem to actually give any sort of charismatic response to engage people within politics. Yes. He doesn't make a joke. He doesn't poke fun. He just kind of goes, and well, we look at more. It was the last PMQ's Keir was in. It was almost like, oh, and we're looking at cross-party. We're glad. It was just Boris was just agreeing. He was basically saying stuff, and Boris was, yes, we're doing that. And it was like, it wasn't a proper PMQs. It was almost Keir saying, "Oh, Boris, you're doing a wonderful job. I support you so much, and we'll be happy to work with you on this bill. Will you support and work with us on this bill?" Boris saying, "Yes, but we're looking to work on this bill, and we're working on this bill cross-party. Yes, we do. I'm glad, my honourable friend, we have his support." It was kind of just back and forth and agreeing. This has now turned into the impersonation politics show. Right? It has, but it's fascinating to see. It was much nicer to see someone at least charismatic on the stand, even though he did make hypocrisy comments saying to, "Oh, well, Boris must not make party political points ahead of this such important issue like climate change," and then proceeded to try and score party points. And Boris was very much like, "Oh, the honourable gentleman still seems to not be hypocritical, and he is addressing his political points himself, or party political points himself." Yes. So it was again. It's nice to see charisma back at the dispatch box. It was funny in PMQs as well. Boris was giving a response back to a question from Ian Blackford, who is the SNP Westminster leader, and he got booed by the Tories. Anyway, he stood up there and he's screaming to not screaming, but a mix of screaming and shouting at Boris, "Answer the question! Answer the question!" Because Boris was just sort of. I mean, it's amazing how Boris can just. I'll see if I can find a clip and we can play the audio because it is public domain. It's much nicer. No, it's nice to see some charisma back at PMQs. Although people are arguing, "Oh, it's just turning into a shouting match," but it actually engages people in politics. Yes, and that's the whole point of PMQs: is you ask the Prime Minister a question, and it's to see how your leaders perform on debate. Really. Yeah, it's a theatrical performance, as I'm sure it's been described many a times before. Indeed. It was much. It's nice to see, I think. But yes. So we have a. I can actually access. There is a video here. I have the audio files. I say that with such a joy. So we may be able to listen to a bit of the audio here. We should start to collect audio to put in. Yes. So,
Mr. Speaker, and can I join with the leader of the opposition?
He lost his
in
voice, I
sending
think.
Condolences to the family of Henry Ross.
No, that's last week's. Wrong one.
I did think he didn't sound like that.
No. Yes. Oh, I found a better one. I think this is the actual one. I was going to say I didn't remember him losing his voice either.
SMP in Blackford.
Thank you,
Did you
Mr.
see?
Speaker. I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of the entire House will be with the family of Walter Smith, who sadly passed away yesterday. The legend that
Let us
was
get to the shouty bit.
The dire face responsibility.
An issue that I know is on the minds of many people in this House and across the country. We're proud of what we've done to welcome
Our
people
wonderful
from
leader
Afghanistan,
Boris
but we must
speaking
do
there.
everything we can also
Yes.
to mitigate
Oliver's putting a face there. He doesn't think Boris is our wonderful leader.
consequences for the people of Afghanistan, of the Taliban.
But I think he has a response here.
And people are in need today. There is nothing there about tangible action.
Pitting, which I think most fair-minded
Yes.
people in this country.
I
was
think
a
unfortunately
pretty
doesn't do it
remarkable
justice,
feat,
this video,
by UK
but,
armed services. And many of
you
them
can't-
many of those 15,000 are already being integrated into the UK, into schools, into communities, and we will help them in any way that we can. And one of the reasons, and I'm afraid he's completely wrong in his characterisation of the stance the UK has taken towards Afghanistan and the changes there. We continue to engage. We engage with the Taliban. This country was one of the first to
Not sure that's a good thing there.
and what we are insisting on is safe passage, Mr. Speaker. And what we are insisting, just to get to his point where he rather uncivilly calls out, what we are insisting on, Mr. Speaker, is that there is safe passage for those who wish to come and settle in this country, for people to whom we owe an obligation. And that is what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. And I have answered the question.
But I must say, Boris there, unfortunately using the term passage rather than passage, I think he is failing as our leader. And don't you start now, Oliver. But yes, that has been our kind of the week in review. So yeah, I think it's been an interesting episode. And what do you have any ideas of what we're discussing next week, Oliver? I think on PolitiBabble.
Well, it's been coming up time and time again. Archie's wanted to discuss it, and it's been cancel culture. And
Oliver does a funny face there, by the way. He doesn't believe it's real. Wait till you're cancelled, Oliver, for your anti-vaxxer views, and we'll soon see who's boss.
Anyway, Archie's been wanting to discuss this for a while, so hopefully we will. We may even get a guest on. Who even knows? If they turn
It'd be a
up.
surprise.
But that's really it. You'll have to listen to the episode to find out more on cancel culture. That
And are
concludes our
we losing our historical statues? That is a pertinent question put in the Telegraph this week. So all that will be coming up next week on your favourite youth political podcast, PolitiBabble, truly the best political podcast anywhere on planet Earth. Obviously, other planets are available.
Planet blah, blah,
Blah, indeed, as Greta Thunberg said. So, yes.
You've been PolitiBabbles.
And the outro music continues there, so we can keep on going with planet blah blah blah. Other planets are available, and you can find our more podcast episodes on manxradio.com/podcast/PolitiBabble. As usual, do get in touch, do engage with our social media, and any comments, as usual, send them through. Tweet us. We don't care. We're happy to have controversial and quite enlightening discussions with you. We want to hear your thoughts, and I think my Twitter at the moment has had an interesting week. So yes, go hit us up at PolitiBabble or at AElliotIM, or I don't know what Oliver wants to plug his tag there. But I think it's too late for Oliver to plug his tags. I'll do the Max Fosh and bleep it out. Well, yes, that's been all from this week.
You've been PolitiBabbles.
We can dance at this last bit.